screen. Okay, I can't see anyone joining online now, but if you can see these, oh no, you hear you're popping up here. Perfect. Can everyone see these slides? Yeah.
Yep.
We'll try and make them go full screen. Yeah. That's good for us in the room. Is that good for people online?
Yep, it's gone full screen.
Perfect. And we're recording, so that's great. So we should probably introduce ourselves. I can go first. So,
of course,
my name's Chris. I've not met everyone in the room, but I'm one of the directors of Arran Community Renewables. So been involved since, well, we sort of span out of EcoSavvy 5-6 years ago, I think, originally. So EcoSavvy was looking to do an energy project, but wanted to sort of get that going as a sort of side thing, because it's quite doing an infrastructure project is quite a different thing to the day job. Whereas my day job is doing infrastructure projects and energy. So I was cornered in a community hall in Corrie Hall 5-6 years ago. I guess my connection as well. In-laws live in Loughmanser, and increasingly spending more time split between here and Bristol. And as my wife has also been a bit involved in the project as well. So yeah, I work in day job. I work for Thrive Renewables. So we're a spin-off from Triodos, which is an ethical bank doing similar sort of projects. Mostly working on wind farms, but bits of solar as well. So it's not too different from the day job, which is helpful. Yeah, and Gavin.
Okay, I'm Gavin Stephen. The photographer caught the picture in a bad time. The hair just decided to go upwards and didn't do the comb over. Anyway, yeah, I got recruited back in COVID days of 2021. I was asked to attend a meeting on King's Cross Point at the Granny Mouse bench. And from there, I've been working with Chris and the others towards this project. We've had one or two other projects that unfortunately didn't go forward for various reasons. But I think they were learning experiences. I think we learned a lot. Yeah. So my background is I'm retired. I have worked for BT as a senior project manager. My degree is in electrical and electronic engineering. So I'm a bit familiar with what we're doing and what we're trying to do. So I think we'll move on now to the site.
I think before, should we go just quickly round? Might be useful to know everyone who's here, what everyone's like, very quickly to see what everyone's interest is. Should we maybe start in the room and then jump online just very briefly who everyone is and what you're interested in?
Yeah. My name's Selena Paul. I live almost quite near to Gavin, actually, in King's Cross, and I have a small holding there, and I'm really interested in all forms of renewable energy and what it can do for the island.
Great.
I'm Kenny Bowen, owner of Glenkiln, the landowner of the site, and adjacent to Glenkiln Hydro. And yeah, I'm a director of the Arran Development Trust as well.
I'm Anna Baker. It's my fault that Chris has got roped into this, I suppose. I work in construction, but I've also worked a little bit on this project as well. So I know some, if not all, of what's coming.
I'm Nick Burgess, live in Whiting Bay and interested in the development of solar farm.
I'm Cheryl Burgess, I live in Whiting Bay too, and yeah, just a general interest in renewable energy and hopefully having it here on Arran for people's benefit.
And then online, should we go around? Mark, you're first on my screen.
Yeah, I'm Mark Wickstead. I live in Brodick. And yeah, I'm just interested from just to see how the project's going and find out more.
Then Christina. Sorry, gone. This way around for now.
Hi there, I'm Christina Gruszecka. I'm live up in Lochranza, and I'm just generally interested, partly in the project and partly to see what my family is involved in.
Who's there? We've got John. Ten minutes early. You're not on. We'll come back to you, John. If you could chip in, if you get your microphone working. Sergey.
Hi there, I'm Serge. I'm in Brodick, just outside of it, and yeah, I'm just relatively very new to Arran and interested in what's happening on the renewable front.
David's.
Exactly what Christina said earlier on, who is my wife. Generally, see what some of the families getting up to.
And Neil, last but not least. Neil, can you hear us? But we can't hear you.
Okay, there we go. Apologies for that. I'm Neil Wilkinson, live in Kilmorey. I'm very active in the Scottish Green Party and also a recent eco-savvy trustee and interested in this particular project and in renewable energy in general.
Great. We'll get so everyone online. We can only see you on my laptop, so we'll try and get you on the big screen for questions at the end. But I think jump in with questions whenever. Like, it's a small group, it's going to be much more interesting, not just us talking to you. But should we get started? We've got a few sort of slides that just sort of guide the way, but we can jump in with, actually no, I'm going to share my screen and then we can. Pardon? Yeah, they are for us, but not for the guys online, I don't think. Okay, that should be for everyone now. I think everyone can see that. Yep. Okay. Gavin.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris. Right. Hello and welcome, everybody. As you can see on the screen, we have a red area which is locally known as Top 20. That's Kenny's field there, and the pink line that you see is the access road that we're currently in discussion with North Ayrshire Council on, because that's how we're going to be accessing the site itself. I think the best thing to do is, oops, is it down?
Right down.
Nope. Sorry, everybody, it's not my laptop. There we go. Yeah, so the site, what we've got here are 3 visuals that were set for the planning application. And Kenny, don't ignore the red. This was draft number 1, as you're aware. But you can see on viewpoint 1, which is actually from Benlister Road, just beyond the new developments there, that the extent of the solar panels. Now, the site itself is a generally southerly sloping field. It is crowned in that to the east and to the west, it gently slopes. So what you're seeing there in that viewpoint 1 is what would be seen from Benlister. So you would see approximately about 1/3 of the site. Viewpoint 2 which was taken from just close to the Arran Fine Foods factory. You can see again, it's a relatively gentle slope, but you don't see the whole field. Again, you're seeing about half of the field from there. And then viewpoint 3, which was taken from the road on the last house on the Whiting Bay Road. And again, you can see there's a blue sliver in there, and that again, it's a marginal visual impact. So we couldn't have picked a better site, or we couldn't have been able to find a better site for this. So again, as I say, it's known as locally by Kenny as Top 20, and it's currently used for sheep grazing. It's about 20 acres, 8.6 hectares, in a generally southerly facing direction. One of the positives of it is that it's relatively close to the SSEN 33 kilovolt transmission route, about just over a kilometre. Now that's important when you start to talk to SSEN, because their prices are not cheap. I think that's safe to say that we've had various costs on feasibility studies ranging from 6.5 million downwards. We've had 2 surveys on the routes that we've chosen, or the route that we've chosen. And the first one was 650,000, and we've managed to get it down now to 400,000, just over 400,000. So it's extremely important, because the cost can escalate quite quickly depending on how far you've actually got to send this transmission. So
is that's just the connection?
That's just the connection, purely the connection, and that's only for the distribution side of it. There is another connection charge that we're currently in discussion with the National Grid group. They're called NESO, NESO, and that's another connection charge. So
that's to get some money back. That's to put it into the grid to get.
Well, the National Grid are tasked with upgrading the national infrastructure, and part of the problem is where we are is Carradale. It's the main switching centre, so we've got to get to Carradale before we then hit the major. Is it 300 kilovolt? I think it's 300. It's pretty big anyway.
It's a big supply.
Yeah, it's a big switching area, and it's picking up all the wind farms as well. So Carradale 1 is full. Carradale 2 was where we were promised, and Carradale 3 is planned for 2034. Yep. So that's the kind of time frame that we're looking at.
That would be a small sort of set of holes, so you keep big pylons and things like that.
That's where the pylons kick in.
Yeah, but it Carradale.
But yeah, it Carradale.
On this side, it wouldn't be like that.
No, it's wooden pole route overhead.
The Carradale will be just a small bus bar added onto there. Compared to the schemes connecting there, we're so small. But unfortunately, they still charge some standard fees for connecting into the transmission network. The way they see it is they're the ones distributing the electrons around the country for you and selling you power for you. So it's an ongoing battle, and it's in national news, the struggles of the transmission network. So there's a big shake-up about how it's going to be treated, which we're in as well.
Yeah, we're in the middle of that.
So hopefully, something you can't go into anybody else and someone else.
Yeah, it is. I can't remember if we're covering this.
Yeah,
Later. We might be covering later, but we can talk about it now. That they're trying to shift everything around a bit to prioritise projects that are ready to go. Most projects in the pipeline are either fictional, developers taking a chance, or aren't going to be built for a long time. The things that they require to jump yourself to the top of the queue: planning consent, and land run. And then we have failed. So we are, some of the delays there saying are quite scary, but we have all the reasons to jump.
Yep. All right, Ken, you'll see there. Bob wants it. So we'll be covering a few other items round about that, but since we have the planning permission, we do have to start the process of looking at the actual site itself and how much it's going to cost us to put solar panels on it. And part of that was we actually did some technical surveys. There's a topographic survey, which basically just maps out the site itself. A utility survey, where we actually literally, not us, but our consultants had to write off to people like City Fibre, Openreach, Scottish Water, to see if there were any utilities in the ground. I mean, Kenny said there's a water main that runs across, but it's redundant. Yeah, so they need to know these things. So this is all part of what we as a company would be giving to the contractors to say, can you give us a price for this? And making sure that there's no utilities in place. Ground penetrating radar was used. Basically, the guys were walking around the perimeter for about 2 days, I think it took to cover that. And then pool tests. You need to know the stability of the ground that you're in. You need to know what it's composed of. There are different methods of anchoring down solar panels. So how do you prevent them from being blown away? Yeah, so we have to, you got that? Yeah. So part of the reasoning was that if we cleared these hurdles early, then we are in a better position now to go back to contractors and say, this is what the lie of the land is. And we've had 3 relatively good quotes at the present moment. More expensive than we expected, but they're relatively good quotes. Okay, so Chris, do you want to?
Yeah, my next. So some of the main numbers, which we can drill into a bit, but so it's a 6 megawatt solar farm. Probably doesn't mean much in terms of what that is. And it's 4 megawatt export connection. So the reason those numbers are different is you don't normally size the panels for your export connection, especially in Scotland, because we are generating on the sunniest sunny day on day 1 before there's any degradation of the panels. Will generate 6 megawatts. All the rest of the time we'll be generating less. You pay for what you get on the grid export, so you always size it a bit less. And there'll be 1 day a year where we might have a bit more that won't go through. So you want to size it a bit bigger anyway, just to maximize your generation. So we have 6 megawatt solar farm going out to a 4 megawatt export connection, and that works out about a quarter of Arran's domestic electricity consumption. And there's lots of interesting stuff there about whether it becomes Arran's electricity consumption. But at the moment, regardless of where the electrons flow, it all goes into the soup of the transmission network. We'll come on to that later. It's 40-year lease, so it's a long-term project which we're going to need to pay it back. These are long-term infrastructure investments. The planning consent doesn't have a time limitation on it, which is very rare. Normally with solar, there's a requirement of planning to decommission it after 25 years or apply for a new. But there isn't a limit like that on our planning consent. Up to about £5 million construction cost. Go into that later. Targeting community fund at least 30 grand a year. We'd like to do more. That's probably the point at which we say below that, what's the point? But in a way, if we can't pay enough into the community fund and we're just paying bank loans off, then what is the point? So we need to get it to the point where we can do at least that to be worthwhile taking forward as a community project. Targeting shareholder returns of about 5%. We think we need to raise enough money. We think we need to offer at least 5% to raise some serious amounts of money. There may be some people who would invest at low return, given it's a local project doing good things, but we may need to raise upwards of £2 million, and there are lots of people who can get that rate elsewhere. So we need to be conscious of that.
Okay, ground conditions. Going back to the last but one slide. Our site ground conditions are classed as glacial till. It's basically a moraine that has been deposited by a previous glacier, and that glacier carved the glens and that we have now. So it's very varied conditions. Some areas are sand, but some areas are almost solid rock. This is all part of the ground penetrating radar, which I will say came back saying it's not exactly the most accurate method because it doesn't like wet ground. It needs a dry. With GPR, you can go down a couple, you go 10 meters, but on a wet ground, you're lucky if it goes 1 meter. So it was a combination of both the pool test information and ground penetrating radar that allowed us to start to look at the composition of the soil. That leads us to part of the problem of the uncertainty is we don't yet know what type of anchoring system is going to be used. Ballast is expensive. Basically, they're very large concrete blocks that just hold down the panels. However, there is a newer system which is anchor bolts. I think
X-anchors.
Yeah. That one of our contractors has actually suggested might work for us. Basically, it's angled bolts that go in at 45 degrees. But this was just a bit of fun. It can be wet. It was wet the couple of days that the guys turned up to use that tracked auger. And that's one of the holes that they had to do for the pool test. The auger got stuck, and it had to be pulled out. I had to get a tractor to pull it out. It was unfortunate that it picked that week because the previous week it had absolutely tipped it down. So the field was very, very wet. But the positive side of that is that at least it was the worst possible conditions. So you can look at it positively. Okay.
I guess the key point of that is if we can't pile the foundations, about a 20% increase in cost to float the foundation. So we really need to be able to do some sort of pile.
Yeah. Okay, so we had 3 conditions on our planning approval. The main one is archaeology. Kenny's familiar with this because he had to go through exactly the same procedure for the hydro scheme. You have to undertake archaeological investigations, and basically what they do is they have to scrape off the organic matter down to a depth of subsoil that they can determine to see if there's been any disturbance of that subsoil. Now, it's a common factor in planning that they require an 8% of the built area to be trenched. Now, a trench is a 2-meter bucket and it's dragged by a excavator. There will be a archaeologist, trained archaeologist on site for about 2 to 3 weeks. They do about 200 meters a day, which is cut and cover, roughly. So in our case, that totals about 3,500 linear meters of trenching. It's not going to be cheap, but you know we'll work around that. We've already submitted a written scheme of investigation to the West of Scotland Archaeological Service, and they are the agents on behalf of North Ayrshire. So they're the ones that we have to convince that there's nothing there.
Would the ground penetrating radar show anything?
It's mostly useless.
It was a good question. It's the first thing we asked as well.
Yeah, and you've got to also bear in mind that the GPR doesn't cover every square meter. Yeah.
Well, that
You
would
would have-
cover either.
Exactly. But it's 8%. Yeah, so you've got a 2-meter wide bucket.
There are definitely projects where the archaeological dig is going deeper than the actual project will go. And it's questionable whether it's I think some council archaeologists have jumped on the opportunity to do digs on the back of solar farms. There's definitely a balance to be had.
Yeah. So what we did was we contacted Rathmel Archaeological Services in Winning, and the chap there who is familiar with the area because he's done some of the archaeological work for Roerden. I think he did some for you as well, Kenny. Or
He did some for the Scottish Water in 1991. Found the oldest dwelling in Scotland. It's 10,000 BC, 12,000 years old.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
When you find that.
yeah, 1991.
So he's
Well,
good.
Yeah, and Glenkiln, yeah.
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, they dug up about 2 tons of arrowheads, and they all went to a Glasgow museum, a place, and Hilton Museum have a place. It's a big storeroom they have, and that's where all the arrowheads are.
I knew that. Oh, yeah.
We asked to get them back, some of them back for the local museum in Brody, but they wouldn't give us them. They belong to the Queen. So,
He's going to use them again.
so just to let you know, this very a lot of archaeology in Glenkiln.
Yeah, and also you have to. I mean, you've got Lamlash grave just across the hill. You also found some shillings as well.
Yeah, well, we see the shillings were there, but one was right on the line of the pipeline. But we weren't allowed to move it. We weren't allowed to move the pipeline because it was part of the planning application. So that shilling had to be dismantled using experts, and every stone had to be hand drawn and photographed.
Yeah.
It was 3 weeks delayed to do that.
Yeah, so hence the last line there. It can be expensive, and if anything is found, can escalate both time and cost quite quickly. We're hoping we don't find anything.
Yeah, I mean, so we budgeted for the survey work. We haven't budgeted for finding anything. It's safe to say that would be a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few things that will be a challenge, but I mean, that's, I guess, why in the programme of things, we want to do the archaeology next, because if it is going to kill the project, then we need to know about it soon before we get quite far down the line on other.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Governance, I've got the boring ones. I'll come the other side of it as well. I'm speaking one direction. So we are currently Arran Community Renewables. So that's the community benefit society we set up a while ago. So I won't go into all the community entities, but Community Benefit Society, the main thing about it is it's a 1 member, 1 vote system. So that means once we get going in earnest and we have people invest in the projects, regardless of how much people invest or are involved in Arran Community Renewables, it is a one member, one vote system. So that it's a very democratized system that can be good for reasons, can be bad for reasons, but it goes to the heart of why it's a community entity ultimately, because everyone in the community who wants to become a member has a say. It's not about a larger shareholding having a larger say, or a bank getting involved, or the bank having a larger say. But we do need a bank and finance to be involved. So a bank won't invest in Arran Community Renewables because it can't take a share charge over it. That a bit like buying a house, bank has to be able to take possession of things if things go wrong. So the way these things are typically done, and the best way to do it, is have a 100% owned subsidiary, which isn't a limited company, which is another community entity.
Okay.
I'm probably always. I'm going to spit that out, but I'm not standing anyone's way. So the community interest company would be the most. We'll be taking advice on it, but it's most likely that the solar project will move into a community interest company that will be wholly owned by the Community Benefit Society. The community interest company, what makes those unique is the asset lock. So everything in Glenkiln Solar as a community interest company, any revenue has to flow up to Arran Community Renewables. It can't be sold. That's a big one. So if all these things are mostly about what happens if things go wrong, the bank has to get involved. It can't be sold. It has to stay locked there. So if it got into trouble and the bank stepped in, it got it back into a stage where it was working again, they can't sell it or make profit out of it. It has to stay with that bond to Arran Community Renewables. So
could I just say that we're a member of Co-op UK, Cooperatives UK, and so we're, I guess, affiliated to the co-op, the stores, and that any failure of ACR is in the constitution that the assets must go to another charity or community benefit society. So we're locked in so that any assets cannot be distributed amongst other people. It has to go to a community benefit society or a charity as part of the constitution. Okay, sorry, Chris.
No, it's fine. So roughly how it works, this is just one option, and there's other ways of doing it. This is the most common option, so I thought we'd talk it through. So we would raise bonds, shares, maybe a mix of both from the community. That could be, the intention is that would be from quite a low hurdle rate, so that people can invest from quite a small amount. We might have loads of shareholders. That gets messy. That's fine. We as Arran Community Renewables can deal with that. That's then just one loan into Glenkiln Solar, so it's nice and straightforward for the bank. And for the phenomenal cost of all the bank's due diligence and the insurers' due diligence and everything else, it's just very simple, one shareholder loan from Arran Community Renewables. So the reason that we need the community shares, or we want the community shares, is that a bit like, again, buying a house, you need a deposit, you need cash in the project. So a bank will want to see some skin in the game, and that's from the community shares. If we couldn't raise enough locally, we can top that up from other sort of cash investors that help communities in these sorts of projects. So yeah, that would all flow into Glenkiln Solar. That's where the project would be run. That's where all the operational contracts would sit. All revenue from it, after paying those operational costs, would flow back up to ACR. We would distribute payments back to the shareholders. So we get one lump sum and then split that amongst all the community shareholders. And then that's also where the community benefit payment gets paid out. So there's kind of two sides for being a community project. One is the ability for the community to invest in it, but that's only people who have money and want to invest in it. There's also the community benefit payment, which is the amount that we want to try and have it as a fixed amount, bit like an operational contract to keep it as a bare minimum. But then any surplus at all then goes into that pot. That pot is spent by ACR, not Glenkiln Solar. So that is really the one member, one vote thing. We've got ideas of where we'd like to spend the money in the local community, but it will be up to the membership of ACR at the time on a one member, one vote system. So very democratic way of spending that community benefit.
We could also mention that again, the co-op run the community benefits by picking two local entities. I believe Coast is one of them this year. I can't remember who the other one is, but it goes round the island. There's been the Arran Brass Band, I believe the Pipe Band have had some money. Some of the nursery have had other funds over the last few years. So it can be beneficial to each of the individuals entities.
So this is rough, but extremely rounded and rough. The whole every model is wrong, some are useful, I think applies to this. This is not exactly how things will work out, but it's sort of an indication. One indication, however, the next slide is another indication, because you'll see the outgoings are more than the income. So this is where we are now, which is the reason that we're not building it tomorrow, but it's not to be sort of worried about that. I guess all projects get to this point where we have to try and balance things out. So we are looking at roughly about 400 to 500,000 pounds a year income, depending on the price we get for power. And then that's split between about 150,000 pounds of operational costs. So that covers everything from the services agreement, our insurance. We need to keep a fund going for the inverters, which are like the power electronics on the scheme, lasts about 12 years. So we need to have sinking funds for maintenance. Rent comes out of that. Some of the fees to the grid. So there's about 150 grand of operational costs. Then there's the bank and the bank interests, paying back the bank for the loan. So the more we raise from the community, then the less we need from the banks. So that helps. And then after that, there's community share interest and community funds. And in this scenario, that doesn't balance. So we are aiming to get here before we get going on the project. So a little bit more income. So we're speaking to people about securing higher rates for selling power. There are some interesting options for that because we are a community group and because of the scale. There are some ways of generating a bit more income, selling the power in novel ways, and reducing our outgoings. One of the main things on that is just reducing the bank loan. So a very simple thing, but a big ask to Scottish Government of putting some more grant funding towards it. So we just have to borrow less. We're in conversations with GB Energy around that as well, and others. There's sort of a big push. We're trying to push it sort of nationally as it will be Scotland's largest community energy project. So there are people interested in helping us in getting the bank debt down so that we can afford this. So yeah, that's kind of where we need to get to, and that's a lot of focus of the next year. Speaking of the next year, this is kind of all of our to-do list. So I'm not going to go through this line by line, but where we are in our sort of program. So the consenting is pretty much behind us, which is great. So we've got land planning sorted, which is not to be sniffed at. It's quite a lot of projects spend a lot of years and don't get that fast. It's good to have that behind us. We still have a couple of bits of consenting to go, the archaeological stuff, which we've talked about, and the overhead line. So the quite a short section of overhead line where we come off 33 kV needs to go in. That needs its own planning consent. It's something that's done by SSEN. It's not done by us. Should be a fairly formality in the scheme of things. But yes, it's on the list. Grids. So we have our distribution offer, which we've accepted, and it's quite competitively priced in the scheme of things. So we're sort of happy with that. The timeline for the distribution connection is fine. The thing we're working through at the moment is this connection. So NESO is the energy system operator. So that's the transmission network. That's Carradale, essentially. We were given assurances that we would fit onto Carradale 2. So the current, well, when we started this conversation, it was Carradale 1, now it's Carradale 2. NESO are dealing with, I think it's like they have 300 applications a day or something crazy. So we are getting a lot of generic pushback, which would say, go away, you can come back onto Carradale 3. We need to work that through and get onto Carradale 2, otherwise we're looking at the 2030s before.
Can we just say there the SSEN distribution have been extremely helpful?
Yes,
So
and that is important because NESO are trying to sift through what's real and not real, and having to put sort of crazy dates on offers because they're contractually obliged to meet those dates. And the UK has, we need about 200 gigawatts of generation. In the queue of projects connecting is about 800 gigawatts. So there's already a huge oversupply of potential projects. But yes, the distribution system has been very helpful and is confident that that can be resolved with NESO and that we will be on to Carradale 2 and there won't be a transmission delay at all. It's quite a binary one there, either whether there's no delay or there's a huge delay, and we're working through. We should know that in the next couple of months, whether we're sort of mothballing this for a decade or cracking on with it tomorrow. So it's quite an important one. We've also got a bit of other work going on, so could probably get another megawatt of export out of the cables. It's something that's good to go along in the background, but it doesn't sort of change things, but we'd be silly not to apply for it. The initial steer was we couldn't, and so we didn't. And now they've come back and said, well, actually there's a bit more capacity in there. That capacity will be at the back of the queue, so it's for a second phase years down the line, but we should apply for it now. We have the chance. So we're getting into that funding stage now. I'll jump to construction first. So we've done the surveys, done a lot of the procurements. Projects don't normally at this stage have contractors who properly price the job, which is really useful. We've pretty much done the contractor procurement. So all we need to do now is just get people to refresh their prices and go forward. But we've got a fairly robust price from 3 contractors, which is great. And that allows us to enter some of the funding conversations a bit more seriously than others at this stage, which is great. So we've talked about the ownership structure, getting that in place, and we, especially as myself and Gavin as directors, our experience is getting projects to this stage. We need to bring on both our side and from sort of entities who are supporting us more of the support now around raising share offers. Speaking to banks, bringing that money in. So that funding stage we're starting now, and it will probably be a couple of years to get from £0 to 5 million ready to go. So yeah, that's the overall programme.
Are you expecting any part-time, full-time employment arising from keeping the solar farm going once it's up and running, like for local employment for the island?
Yes. There will be, so there are the roles that there'll be, the sort of asset management, which is keeping the thing running in terms of the bookkeeping, the power sale contracts, insurance, things like that. There'll be the general bookkeeping and finance will be a role as well. And then there's the operations and maintenance, which is, some of that is quite specialist. It doesn't need to be specialist. You get in weird things where the insurance company wants it to be a certain entity. For the first few years, the people who install the panels will be maintaining it because they'll be locked into, they'll be on the hook if it doesn't perform. So that needs to be the same company. But yes, there'll be bits and bobs, but not significant. The project, the solar is not a huge employer. As renewables generally, I'm doing projects in South Wales at the moment, and you know, people really want coal to come back because it's very manual. It brings lots of jobs, and actually wind farms, solar, there aren't that many jobs in. So no, it would more be about the money we generate from the projects being able to give people jobs in other things, or we may be able to use some of the money looking at other projects elsewhere and employ project managers, people out of the funds that come out of this. So hopefully it's a catalyst to do other things which can employ people rather than directly.
I mean, there is, we are currently employing, minimally, I have to say, but Arran accountants, our accountancy company. We're also, when we're talking to the contractors, was kind of suggesting to them that it might be worthwhile training somebody on the island on, you know, panel replacement, for example, or looking at the maintenance requirements of an inverter. You know, would you be able to swap it out? And that would be just a contractor being trained up by the construction company. So there are, they're not directly, you know, as Chris said, we probably will have somebody looking after the accounting side of it. But there won't be any major direct employment. Well, it's not going to be like Lamlash or we're not going to have 130, 100.
No, I wasn't expecting anything like that. I was just, might there be the opportunity in terms of making.
That's always the intention. I mean, we should also say that we have given a couple of presentations to the school, and we've got the 5th and 6th years to come along, and Donald gave them a presentation on renewables and allowed them to ask awkward questions, which they tend to do. So we try and also to encourage the youngsters to learn about technology and how to use it. Yeah, and all of these, I mean, this is all project management. And they're fundamental to every project. You've got to identify what you need to do. And that's the kind of things that you want, you know, they're high valued jobs. That you can get somebody to go into project management, but it's actually quite a detailed.
There are some things we can look to do as well, like so our choice, there are lots of different inverters of the power electronics on the market. Some of them require very specialist people to come in who just know that inverter. But some of them can be regular electricians can train up and do it. So you know we can try and aim to use those types of inverters wherever we can. Just try and do things where it's useful. The main contractor will always subcontract out the civils work. That I imagine will happen on the island as well. Yeah, and for this next stage, I mean, it's a constant frustration that, you know, we're trying to do sort of big infrastructure projects, but we're doing it as volunteers. You know, if government wants community projects to happen, then it does cost money doing all this stuff. So Scottish government have been very receptive to that, and we've had funding, you know, through this stage, and hopefully that continues. So you know, I'd prefer to use, you know, professional paid people to hold discussions with the bank and run the community shared offer. I think that's the way it should be run. So hopefully we'll be able to negotiate a bit of funding so that we can employ someone for this next stage as well. Having enough time. Oh, 5 minutes. We better crack on.
Fine. Okay, so recent activity. Once we got planning permission, we were cock-a-hoop, I think is the phrase we would say. We were really pleased. But then we thought, well, apart from the Arran banner, who else is going to go? We did get into the Arran banner, and at this time it was a solar farm and not a solar wind farm. Colin Speaton did apologise for that one. But it raised an interesting technical discussion about what is solar. Is it solar wind that you're using? Anyway, we'll go. That's a tangent. So part of the discussions that we have on community shares is with a group called DTAS, based in Scotland, and Democratic Trust Association of Scotland, and they've been advising us on how we can get the community more involved in what we're doing. So we went to them and they said, oh, that would be nice. We will fund someone, a PR company, for a couple of days to help you get the news out to the bigger and wider world. And you have to think that we want this out there because that's where the finance is going to come from. So the more publicity you can get, the better. So these are just 4 of the press releases that were sent out and were picked up. Some don't get picked up because they don't have space in that month, and then it's another month. But it doesn't matter, you know. It's publicity, and if it eventually gets there, we'll get through. So the first one to pick up was actually the Herald. Scotland's largest community solar farm gets a green light. They also, I have to say, the DTAS funded a photographer based on the island to come and take some photographs of us. And Kenny, myself, and Helen Ross had a picture taken. Top story, but it's covering up the sheep. So if you can imagine, transpose it that way. So we're trying desperately to, not desperately, that's not the word. We're trying to ensure that the community gets to know about us so that we can then try and involve the community more. At the present moment, it's only a small team, plus the volunteers. We've had volunteers and specialist volunteers that have come along for tax, for leasing, for discussions with PPA suppliers. PPAs, per purchase agreements. Technical term, sorry. So we do have the ability to bring in specialists that actually are on the island, and they're volunteering their time for free. So far we've done okay, but we're getting to the point now where the technical side is going to take on. So next step, Chris, do you want to?
Yes. So as will be no surprise, it's a call for support. I guess it's the main thing for our next step at the moment. So we are quite a skeleton team at the moment. There are four directors, of which Gavin and I are currently sort of doing the bulk of the work. But this is now a £5 million infrastructure project, so it's way too thin a team for 2 volunteers alone to run it. We are confident that we can bring in funding from Scottish government to put in some paid roles, but at the moment we don't have that money there. So we need to build a bigger sort of core team of volunteers to take on the next stage and get involved with some of the funding work as well, especially. So yeah, I guess if anyone in the room or on the call was interested in getting involved, great to hear from you. Equally, if other people that you know would like to get involved, that's also good. I think the amount of work it can be variable. I think at the moment it's just good to have people who are interested and actively involved. And there are lots of different aspects of the projects. There's lots of different things that people can get involved in. It doesn't need specialist expertise as much as it needs sort of time, and like a lot of these things, time and enthusiasm. We're fortunate that through the support from Local Energy Scotland, Scottish Government, comes some specialist consultancy support. So being inquisitive and asking the right questions or any all the stupid questions is the most important thing. because they're all the questions that everyone who wants to invest in the project and benefit the project will be asking. So, it's definitely not specialist input that we necessarily need. So yes, that's going to be the next theme over the next sort of few months, trying to sort of build Arran Community Renewables on the island. And sort of the main goals that we're looking to achieve over the summer. So we've got the archaeological work. It will be potentially quite seasonal when we do it. So maybe depending on if we get the funding for it, crack on with it quite soon. If not, it might be into the spring next year. We'll see. Gavin's having conversations about funding for that with the Scottish Government, which is quite positive at the moment. Setting up a project company, or at least getting to the point where we know what that structure is going to be like. It might make sense to not set it quite up until we need it, but getting to that stage where we're clear on the governance of everything. Getting our membership launch. The timing of this, we don't have members yet, because and that will probably be the case for a couple of months, because if we do have this Carradale issue and we don't have a project in 2030s, then a lot of time, effort, and fuss for people to say what's happening. But equally, we don't want people to say, "Oh, how do we become a member? We can't become a member." So the timing of it's important. We do need to launch it soon, but we need to have enough in place that it's tell people that there's something that's getting involved with. The community share office side of things. So to get that rolling, a lot of that will be external with Community Share Scotland, but some on our side to help with those discussions. By awesome to have this answer on the Carradale connection. So I think bang on time, but we'll run over the questions. I think that was everything we thought we would cover. But I guess the main point was to see any questions from anyone, and I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see everybody joining online. If there's anyone still here. I can see you, but how do I get you on the big screen? So there's a couple of hands up, but I'm just going to try and get you guys on the screen. I don't know why this isn't working. I'm going to just unplug and plug in again. Will work. Yeah, it's not
Back to that again.
Sorry guys. 1 second. I know.
Anyway, while Chris is doing that, for those in the room, if you have any questions whatsoever that we haven't answered for you, there's a couple of little bits of post-it notes there if you wanted to.
So there's a couple of people with their hands up. I think Serge, your hand was up first. Do you want to crack on with any questions? We can't see you yet, but I'll work on that while you ask a question. Maybe Gavin can answer it.
I think Neil's was up first. We get numbering here, 1, 2.
Oh right, you do. Okay, right, great. Neil, go first.
Okay, great presentation, fascinating project, looking good. My question is, I appreciate the electricity would go into the NESO mix, but if there were an island-wide power cut, if the line from Carradale failed, would it be like solar cells on my roof and everything would just stop, or would it be able to have rolling power cuts on the island and give people some power?
You want to answer? I can answer if you like.
If you know the answer, go for it, Gavin.
Right. Okay. The inverters would be exactly the same as on the roof. We haven't incorporated any batteries in this. Part of the big problem is the synchronization of the signal. If you lose the grid connection, then the tolerances within the inverters can actually move away from nominal. Nominal is 50 hertz, and there is a very, very close tolerance allowed to continue to generate within that 50 hertz window. If we lost that, then you would then have to be able to switch the grid off completely, and then you would be running on Arran energy, if you like. But it's highly technical. The grid do not like it. SSEN would hate it because it messes up all their transformers. So it's highly unlikely that we would be allowed to go down that route.
We would like to explore, there are all sorts of interesting things we'd love to explore. It's just finding time to, we tried to sort of keep the blinkers on to getting the project consented, but always thinking about like island tariffs, like an island sort of smart network to do this. And there are interesting things coming around. Like it's historically been really hard because you essentially have to set up as a supply company to sell power locally. Ofgem has recently sort of given some clarity for smaller projects to find the ways around that, and there are like peer-to-peer trading ways of doing it. So you know, there's an organisation called Energy Local that does it as well. So we'll be speaking to them, where you could have an island tariff. People could save money on their bills, and you know we do more by sort of skipping out all the transmission stuff on the bill. So you can save some of your non-commodity costs. So the costs on your bill, on your energy bill, that are to do with the transmission charges. You know, there is a way that we could potentially sell power that avoided those transmission charges. There is one school of thought that really likes that in government because it allows lots of community projects to happen because they can sell power locally. The transmission network obviously hates it because that money is there for the transmission network, and it's there's the whole a local energy system is great until you have blackouts. So you need the national system, so that basically that money is on the bill for a reason. But for small projects, which this is just about in the threshold of, it's a small risk for government to allow this sort of thing to happen. It's not, the floodgates won't open. So there's lots of interesting stuff around there about how we could do local energy tariffs. It's on the list. It's definitely on the list to do. We've got a few conversations ongoing, and with North Ayrshire Council actually about selling power to them. We're fortunate that there's a community wind turbine also within North Ayrshire on the mainland, Kilburney, which is looking to do similar and is a bit further ahead than us. So we can go on the coattails of them and potentially with them as well, because the solar wind is a nice match. So if we sell power together, both community groups together, there's potential premium there too. Okay.
So that answer your question, Neil?
Thank you. Yes, I thought that would be the answer, but some interesting possibilities too.
Number two.
Serge, I think you're next.
Well, I had two, and one of them was answered. That was around that as well. But then I was also curious around, so just how it works. There's these things like the archaeological dig and Caradale 2, and so do those things go ahead with grant funding before you go and do the community share raise? Because obviously they're quite big things that could make the whole thing collapse.
Yes, I mean the short answer is yes. It needs grant funding to do it. If we couldn't get grant funding, we could sign up to a long-term a partnership with their funder who would invest some money at risk in advance. It's not preferable because you prefer to keep all options open until we're at the point where we need construction finance. But someone helping with the finance down the line, maybe it's small fry to them to sort of put some money at risk, but it would mean we have to commit to them earlier than we want to. So yes, it's essentially grant funding from Scottish Government.
Can we also say that so far we've received for the project about £500,000 worth of grant money. Yeah, so there's quite a bit of money invested by the Scottish Government and the CARES organisation to actually see this project move forward.
So we were very successful in mopping up spare cash at the end of their scheme and putting it into our grid connection. Yeah. So because we had an active grid connection, we were able to, whereas other groups, they couldn't spend money quickly. We've got a grid connection where we just need to pay it off. So we could take a chunk of money and put that straight into the grid deposits that we paying. Yeah. And the benefit of that is it starts to become too big to fail. Like, I think that's one of the big strengths of it, that now Scottish Government are quite invested in this project. And so hopefully they'll have to invest a little bit more, because otherwise they're walking away from it. Ultimately that's kind of how it is at the moment. But we are reliant on grant funding, and if they are needing well, they're not needing a return cash-wise, but they're needing a return politically on their investment. So we're quite confident that we should get to the next stages. Yeah. But it's a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork in getting that money. It doesn't turn up on our doorstep immediately, unfortunately. But Gavin's doing a sterling job in keeping them on board.
Thank you.
Okay. I think, Mark, you had your hand up at one time, but not anymore. No. Okay. I think that's all. Any more questions?
I'm interested in glare, if there's ever going to be an issue with glare. I've seen previous, in a previous life, a roof on a factory which actually reflected for quite a long distance. Has any testing been done to see what the glare issue might be, or is it far enough up the hill that nobody's going to see it?
Yeah, no, they're pretty much on all planning applications now. You have to do a Glenkiln glare assessment. So that was done, and that's still on the planning portal with easy to find it. I think it may have used to be that the metal frames probably used to affect more than they do. The best thing I can say probably is to give reassurance on it is you now see lots of solar farms on. We've got one on a helicopter pad on the edge of runways. Like, if there was any risk, you wouldn't put them these days in those sorts of locations. And ultimately, a solar panel's job is to absorb light. That is so there'll be zero reflection from the panel itself. Yeah, so it's just the frames. And they have changed and have different coatings on and things.
Possibly for that reason.
Yeah.
Can we also just mention the helipad that Kenny has authorised on his land? One of the concerns was, putting a helipad on there, because when we put planning request in, we said that the nearest one was Sandbraes, but we went under advisement, and it was in. We mentioned to the planning officer. He said it's okay.
But yeah, it's definitely come up as an issue that wouldn't be required by planners.
Yeah.
But it's
sorted.
Have you got any idea sort of the level of interest across Arran, if people wanting to sort of invest or become members? Or
yeah, it would be. It's quite hard because we don't know how much we're going to raise in the share up. It's all a bit catch-22, like how much we need from banks, how much. So no. I think most people probably know about it now. I think probably. We haven't had that many people come out of the woodwork wanting to help. Everyone's saying, good job, keep going.
We're right behind you.
Yeah. Tell us when it's ready. Tell us when the Community Benefit Fund is paying. But equally, we don't want to. It could be a long old slog, so we don't want to tell people it's just around the corner, and then But you know, we have, I think the main thing, we need to build our mailing list and other things to get the message out there. Of the people, I think we've got 55, 56 people on the mailing list, and we get the stats of like 90% read every message. So I think of the people that we're engaged with, they're quite engaged. So it's just about building that, I think. Didn't have any planning objections. I guess that's a big thing. So we know there's
Not one.
yeah, not a single planning objection, and you know, we didn't hide it. You know, we're posting it a fair
In
bit.
fact, the planning officer said to the consultant, he said, this is most unusual for Arran because normally everything, there are two, three people on Arran that will complain about everything.
And
And
even
they
then,
didn't get one. Maybe they were involved in that. But
maybe they ought to be shareholders.
yeah. So it's, you know, it's good that we haven't had any negative responses from anybody, and we would welcome them. I mean, to be honest, if somebody's negative, it's a positive point for us because we can start to, you know, understand what their problems are, and maybe, you know, maybe we have done something wrong. You know, there's only a few of us, and we're kind of stretched sometimes.
One well-known group that put in a complaint that they wanted to screen it with a hedge.
Oh, that was Arran Civic Society. Yes. Well,
There was gonna be.
To be fair, we did actually put in our planning application that we would put a hedge in, and then Scottish Natural Heritage asked us to take it out because there's waders in the other field that are Kenny's, so they didn't want a hedge. So there's a balance there. Yeah, we wanted to improve the ecology by putting a hedge in. That was our offer.
But they want the sparrowhawk, don't want the sparrowhawks in the hedge looking up at the way.
That was it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think if we were doing wind, it would be more contentious, but it's not. You know, if we're doing wind, we'd have the business model to crack on with it straight away. So I guess that's the flip side. This project is hopefully not that contentious, but you know, it's a thin one to get through, much thinner than wind. You know, the revenue's about a third, and the subsidies have gone. So it's just
We
good.
should actually say there were two other comments on the, but it was the planning officer that made them. One was the Ben Lister Road. He was concerned about deterioration on it. I went across it the other day there. You can't get better than it was, I don't think. Just where the building the new, it goes, yeah. And the other one was water management, and Kenny's already shared with me the plans that are dated 1981, was it? 81, yeah. And for the water management on the field, and as I said earlier, it's drowned. So it's just how do we cope with the water that's immediately going to drip off, and that's the contractors start plan discussion. So that was the only three comments that we had, which were brilliant.
And is the field still going to be grazed? I mean, it's still, the panels high
The
enough.
plan is to graze between the panels, otherwise your mechanical cut-off's gonna.
We don't want that.
There's a argument generally that across the country, solar farms are doing great things in stopping fields getting sprayed too much. So you've got like lots of the southeast, especially, has been pesticides sprayed over it continually, and now for 30, 40 years, you know, the sheep can be grazed, but you can't get in there. So you may have some quite unfertile lands in 20, 30 years time. It's different here, but.
And we did say that we would replant the grass with yellow-tailed bumblebee friendly fescues, and so it's like, no, I'm being serious. It was actually mentioned in
The sheep tend to like them. Good shelter, shades.
I'm trying to encourage the great yellow bumblebee. That's definitely that's what I'd like to encourage. That's why I was suggesting.
There's clovers and fescues, and no, I'm not being serious. I wasn't being funny, but it's just improving the ecology of the ground as well.
I think there's a really interesting piece we could do around on your side of knowledge, a bit like there's maybe still some misconceptions around grazing and solar panels, more amongst maybe farmers. And if we do it well, it's quite a good story to be told about how they can work well together.
Yeah.
Good shelter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I ask, and just a question, the banking system on Arran is pretty feeble at the moment, thanks to the abandonment of Scotland. How are you getting on with the banks for you?
So we're dealing mostly in quite small numbers at the moment because it's all just the feasibility stage work, although I suppose we've had 500 grand total. So we have it's our bank with the co-op. We bank with the co-op.
So
So we're not,
No.
no.
And we can download, we can do everything we need to do online.
yes, of course, but the question is, what's their attitude? Encouraging?
Well, we haven't
Approached them.
Yeah, we have approached them. Well, when it comes to raising money for the project, we will also have to do that through it's quite heavily regulated in a good way, so because it's a financial promotion. So that will have to be done through a third party running a crowd raise. Very strict rules about what you can and can't say. So it will be, it's another one where it's trade-off, wanting to do as much as we can on the island, but having probably to work with a specialist around financial regulation. There are rules now, even the colours that you use on your website, if you use green, it can be seen as greenwashing. So you can't use certain colours now because they're seen as financial promotion, and it's extremely strict. We made the mistake of saying somewhere once that all profits would go to the community, and the FCA took away our membership temporarily because we could use the word profit. That was the wrong word to use, despite saying all to the community. All revenues will go to the community. It is these rules for good reason, but yeah, it is a heavily regulated world around financial promotion. So I think the amount that we use banks on the local things around finance, the banking will probably be quite limited.
Well, thank you all.
Yeah,
On behalf of Arran Community Renewables, Chris and I. And we went 20 minutes over the time allocated, but that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
thanks, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
If you've got any questions, get in touch with us.
Will do.
Oh, good.
yeah.